966.
This is the 966, episode 77. Mr. Richard Wilson, hello.
Lucian Zega, great. Hello, another good one.
Yeah. Well, they're all good. It's just they get slightly better each week, only because we get better each week. And the guests are all equally good, so there's no judgment there, but we're just getting a little bit more practice here.
I have to admit, my mom gave me a rather harsh critique.
Uh-oh.
She said about the last one. She said, Antonia Carver was really, really good, but, and then she sort of...
Mom, I got another call.
No, I wish you can't do that. You can't do that. You just have to say, yeah. Well, I'll work on that. I say like way too much.
You say like way too much?
I say like way too much. That's according to my mom. That's one of the things.
Okay.
So I will try and do better.
Well, we know a really good public speaking coach. His name is Bill Connor. He's a listener and he's a fan and he's a friend. So maybe you and I are both, maybe we're in need of a spiritual retreat with Bill and he can coach us up.
Thanks for bringing up Bill. Bill has been on my case about my background, and I got to get into a different background, and I got to get a step and repeat with the 966 logo and, Susig review and that sort of thing. I just haven't gotten it done. So this is like a mea culpa tour. Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Bill. I'll try and do better.
But I mean, if you're a 966 listener on Apple Podcasts or really anywhere you get podcasts, Spotify as well, you don't see Richard's background, so you're not as offended by the curtain that you see behind him.
That's true. So that's one upside to bonking.
Yeah,
every week.
Yeah. Now, if you are watching us on YouTube, and you can see all of our interviews and conversations and segments of different things, like last week, Richard, and just every week, we've got all of our conversations broken down into segments there. So we really attract new listeners that way, people that just want to hear one or two segments. But if you are watching us on YouTube, you will see any number of cats going in behind me. And I want to make sure they get some screen time here so that they get their SAG card.
SAG card.
But Richard, we've got a really good one this week. We're going to just focus on our interview here with Mr. Steve Lutes from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, longtime friend, been with the Chamber of Commerce for 15 years, and just is really very active over there with the U.S. Saudi Business Program, doing stuff really with a lot of different Middle Eastern countries, and he's traveling there all the time. Just a great discussion. He's so good.
He is good. He's a relentlessly good person too. But I think he's well regarded and is respected, here and abroad. It's for doing good work, and the chamber's doing good work. And it's been our pleasure and a blessing really that we've been able to work with the U.S. Chamber and get to know Steve over the years. So this is a good conversation.
He's also a really good interview. I mean, like, we've known him for forever. Yes. He's like so fun to hang out with, and he's a really intelligent dude. But he's a really good interview. So I was stoked for that. I mean, it's really cool. So please enjoy. We are joined now by Mr. Steve Lutes from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, right across from the White House in Washington, D.C. Steve is Vice President, Middle East Affairs at the U.S. Chamber. He's been there for over 15 years. The U.S. Chamber is the world's largest business organization, and he's been our friend for a while now. Steve, thank you for joining us.
Delighted to be here with, as you said, two old good friends, and really appreciate the opportunity to join you today.
This is a treat because I guess by definition this is work. I mean, this is a program we do, the 966. But since you're a friend, this is just like a chat. And I just want to say, we do know the chamber pretty well, U.S. Chamber, and we do love going down to that building. And Lucian doesn't like it when I go because some time ago, because it is right across from the White House, across Lafayette Square, right?
That's right.
It's lovely. And some time ago, I was complaining about driving down there, and Lucian said, "Oh, I have a secret parking spot."
You stole it from me. I'm still mad about it. It was such a great spot, and every time I go see you guys, Richard's car is there, and I'm still mad about it.
Well, you're not going to publicize that location right now, are you? Because then
no, we can't. It's our secret now. Yeah,
that special fishing hole. You don't want word to spread too wide.
Yep.
No, we have done a number of partnerships with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and one of the things Lucian mentioned that it's the largest business federation. I mean, it's gigantic. I mean, you represent 3 million companies, 2,800 state and local chambers, 830 business associations, over 100 American chambers of commerce abroad. You may be the largest political, policy group in terms of advocating. But one of the things that Lucia and I have always appreciated, Steve, working with you and Cush and all your colleagues over there, is how personable, how personal and friendly, and how welcoming you've always been on projects that you feel, that are furthering everyone's interest, are promoting U.S. business abroad. I just want to take a shout out, because you wonderful to work with, Steve, and Lucia and I want to thank you very much.
Yeah, seconded that. Yeah.
Well, I've got to say too, and right back at you in a sense that since I joined our Middle East team at the U.S. Chamber, and we put a priority on the U.S. Saudi relationship, you both have been there from the start, and what we've been aspiring to do. And it's great to see, your efforts blossom into the 966 and other activities as well, of course. But really cool platform, and I know you're doing God's work in the sense that you're out there, advocating for a deeper, broader, stronger relationship, and that is much appreciated. And that, of course, very much aligns with what we're trying to do at the chamber when it comes to the U.S. Saudi economic relationship.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Greatly appreciated. So let's talk about the chamber. You've been there how long? 17 years?
Yeah, well, I'd have to count exactly, but it's September of 2007 I moved over. Right. So yeah, it's been a while.
But it's a huge organization, and you've sort of been in the international side, and specifically the Middle East side. Can you give us a context about what you're doing now? And then we'll get in later. I want to get into your perspective and how things have evolved, especially with Saudi Arabia and the things you're seeing now. But can you tell us a little bit about the U.S. KSA Business Program and other things you guys are involved with?
No, absolutely. Well, I have been fortunate to have been there since 2007. The majority of that time spent in our international division, specifically on the Middle East team. And a little two interesting factoids. In the chamber, the international division, oftentimes in chamber is thought of for what we're doing domestically, engaging Congress, the alphabet soup of regulatory agencies. Richard, you missed some of the political work, but in fact, it's the international division that's the largest part of the chamber. In many respects, that reflects the aspiration of our members, which is that a lot of the growth opportunities are abroad. Not that the United States isn't a great place to do business, invest, and whatnot, but that a lot of the commercial opportunities to grow companies, be they small young startups or large multinationals, is taking place overseas. And then within that context, actually the Middle East within international is the largest department. Again, something that you might not intuitively think of. You might think Asia or Europe or any of the other geographies, but it's in fact the Middle East department that's the largest. Again, I think reflecting a lot of the opportunity, but also, because it boils down to kind of what we're doing, which is helping American companies kind of peel back that onion and figure out how to succeed and do business in these markets. So I think it's both the opportunity side as well as some of the challenges, understanding those and how to work through those that they face. But we're really proud of that fact. And then when you look at the different markets within the Middle East, I think we spend the lion's share of our time focused on the U.S.-Saudi economic relationship. And part of that is because of, Vision 2030, matched with the fact that U.S. companies remain the go-to choice for Saudis, be they the Saudi government or Saudi businesses. And they understand that U.S. companies continue to provide, that cutting edge innovation and the long enduring partnerships that have existed in all these different new sectors that are coming online and really are the future of the economy. So as at the chamber with our U.S. Saudi Business Program, we're really trying to harness all of that. And that is, if you were to vastly oversimplify it, I'd put it in two buckets, the one bucket being convening activities, events, be it business missions, roundtables, forums that bring together American business leaders with their Saudi counterparts, both in the private sector, but also within the Saudi government, the decision makers. And then that leads into that second bucket, which is the policy regulatory environment. And a lot of what we're doing is not only trying to understand what those commercial and trade and investment opportunities are, but to also engage on, the policy regulatory environment that companies are doing business in. And we always have a mind, that it's a win-win scenario. We want to talk to Saudi policymakers and regulators about, what they put forward is going to shape, investment decisions, whether companies growing, whether they're pulling back, whether they're going in for the first time, and their ease of business and operating in the kingdom. So we want to do that with a lens toward, yes, regulate as you need to, but let's not put unnecessary burdens in the way of business. Let's not, over-regulate it to the point where you're pushing potential investment dollars, into neighboring markets or elsewhere around the globe. So that's a conversation that we're kind of constantly engaged in with Saudi across the whole government, because there is so much going on right now. It's in some respects, it's hard to, as you know well, it's hard to keep up with the rapid pace of reform and activity in that space. But that's really where, that intersection of both kind of business development and policy and regulatory development, that's kind of that intersection is where we find it to be our strength and where we're playing, most of the time.
Well, let's take advantage of your experience at the chamber, and because you've seen a lot, you've overseen a lot, you've introduced and created a lot. So when was essentially in your mind, because I realized previously it was sort of a Middle East program, but when was the USA Saudi Business Program launched? So you can give it an art, you're not absolutely specific, but just sort of the typical date. What you think, what that roughly year was?
Yeah, well, it interestingly it predated Vision 2030,
Right.
but I would say it was 2 or 3 years before the launch of Vision 2030. But in my mind, Vision 2030 really ignited a spark of activity, that we haven't slowed down since. And I would say, including during the pandemic, if anything, during the pandemic, our work, was probably 3-4x, in terms of what we were doing with respect to the Saudi program. So we have seen it evolve, and much of the conversations before, as I think, as you would attest to, a lot of that was focused on how the relationship has gotten us to where we are today. So a lot of that, was with the energy companies, was with security companies, companies in the financial services space. But with Vision 2030 and kind of the mandate to diversify and the need to diversify the kingdom's economy, we've seen kind of interest and discussion in a whole range of sectors unfolding. And some of these are just getting started now, and others are actually much more evolved at this point. But I think that's where a lot of the excitement and a lot of the activity is. Again, not to say that those sectors that have gotten us to where we are today, energy, finance, security, are going away. Certainly not. But there's a lot we can learn from those, and in many respects replicate kind of those longstanding partnerships between the companies in the kingdom. But a lot of the dynamism, I think, is in a lot of these kind of new economy sectors, if you will.
So really interesting. That's sort of where I wanted to get to, because I recall it was actually 2014, because I can remember coming over and sitting down with you and Kush, and our friend Omar Bahlewa was there. And so I think it was 2014 when it was either coming together or germinating. And you do make an interesting point. The sort of the linchpin, the backbone, the foundations for so long of the U.S. corporate relationship with Saudi Arabia was energy, finance, security related. And that's sort of what I want to get to is let's go back to 2014. A lot of the interest in Saudi Arabia was people who were there. Then there was interest because, hey, this is opaque. It might be a promising market. We just don't understand it. Can you help us? But everything went on hyperdrive, in 2016, and actually a few years after that, when some of the things started getting in place. That's what I want, the before and after. So you talked, so you have the before, you have sort of the workhorses, the U.S. corporates with a long record and presence and partnership in Saudi Arabia, and then some others. The group, I imagine the membership group has grown significantly. And you talk about new industries. Two parts, if I can, Steve. I'll throw two-part question at you, which is not very fair. One, can you talk a little bit about the new industries in terms of diversification and that are growing and more, increasing interest? And two, the regulatory environment, how it has changed, if it has changed.
Yeah, no, well, important questions, and I think you hit the nail on the head. That time frame sounds precisely right. You have a better memory than I do, though, to nail down dates. It all kind of blurs together.
Please say that again. I'll share that with my wife because she will just.
What's my birthday, Richard?
Exactly.
It does remind me that I have my wife's birth date and anniversary coming up soon, so I'm going to scratch a couple notes here to remind myself on that. But no, Rich, I think you great questions that I think really portend the future of the bilateral economic relationship when you think about it. On those new areas, again, this is no way to diminish those sectors that we're talking about, because they're going to be strong going forward. And you never want to take anything as a you never just want to assume, but we're going to continue to tend to those, and those relationships will of course still be there, and those will be fruitful relationships. But what we're seeing, and we were, and Lucian, I think you were there at the same time. We were in Saudi just after the LEAP conference, and there were some massive announcements, and I think everything that LEAP kind of really embodies in many respects. One of those key areas, which is, kind of the digital economy and technology. We know how plugged in Saudi Arabians are as individuals, their companies, their country, their government. That to me, we haven't hardly scratched the surface, I think, of what the future is going to be in that space. And if you look at a lot of the time that we spend on that second piece, on the regulatory environment, I think they actually kind of go well together. Saudi's just starting to shape, their kind of regulatory ecosystem. I'm sure you're fully aware, they've had under work now for over a couple of years the PDPL, the Personal Data Protection Law, and that's something credit to Minister Al Swaha, to Sadaya, NDMO, and that broader ecosystem. I think that's become a best in case kind of blueprint for how we would like to see government consult, engage, dialogue with the private sector, because it's been robust and the door has been wide open. We've been at the table really from the beginning, and we've been working with our members then, of course, because by no means is Steve Lutz the expert when it comes to cross-border data flows and all the different considerations and nuances of a data law like that. But guess what? We have great member companies who are experts and have been down this road before, worked on these issues in other markets, who have people with a lot of breadth and depth in this. And the chamber, in fact, has people on our team who work on these issues around the globe that we draw upon. So we're able to kind of bring all of those perspectives to bear and have a conversation with the kind of the Saudi decision makers that are guiding the PDPL. And we've been able to give them all sorts of input and ideas as they design and reform that law going forward. And I think the next iteration will be coming soon. And we are grateful that they've incorporated a lot of our recommendations, not just for the self-serving interest, but because it'll ultimately create a better product that will drive more investment, that will drive more innovation from American companies, and more partnerships with American companies. So, that's a great melding of a new, really important emerging sector and kind of that policy regulatory piece that we've seen. And we'd like to see that kind of mushroom, across a lot of these other areas, be it in kind of life sciences and genomics, be it in other areas that we're starting to see a lot more interest in the creative industries. We're doing a lot with the kind of Netflixes and the Amazons, and talking to the Saudis, obviously an incredibly young, dynamic, creative population. I think, again, just scratching the surface when it comes to that. There's so much more to do in that space as well. And I'm, of course, tourism. When we're talking about 2014, I mean, imagine the challenge to get a visa to get to Saudi. Now, yes, I may have a 5-year visa in my passport, but I just continue doing the e-visa. It's so easy.
It's so easy. Yeah.
Why not? I think, again, a huge opportunity beyond what was historically religious tourism to tap into Aola, the Red Sea Project, and Neom, and all of these things that are coming online. Of course, Diriyah Gate, the Boulevard right there in Riyadh. It's so exciting, to see how the kingdom's evolving in all of these areas, and probably several that I didn't mention.
Well, I love your reference to the person data protection policy, and I'll be less diplomatic than you. When it was announced, it was a fail. It was far too restrictive. It would have throttled, a business in a huge way. No really business, international company that had to move data around the world could have done their work. And this was made clear, and the Saudi government responded. I think this is important to point out because that seems to be representative of the new approach. Obviously, responding, much more quick response, flexibility, listening. We had an interesting, Lucian, we did a one big thing on the National Competitiveness Center and their platform that basically takes surveys on behalf of key ministries when they're considering policies, and so they're getting intake, and then this all feeds back in. So is this something is this something that you've seen, first of all, just an openness to this and a rapid response to these questions?
100%. I think you're right. The PDPL, to their credit, it started off, there was all sorts of issues and challenges with that, but they listened and they took that feedback, and it has evolved. Is there always nits and things that we still might have a little issue here, of course, and we haven't seen what that latest version, but it has made leaps and bounds, in the direction that we wanted to see it go. And again, that's good for them, and it's certainly good for investment and innovation and U.S. companies that have big aspirations in the kingdom. Now, you beat me to it. I was going to mention the National Competitiveness Center and Her Excellency Dr. Iman. I think they're at this kind of really important fulcrum of so much of this activity across the government. And I'd put the Ministry of Investment in there as well. We as the private sector, we need our advocates, to go to bat for us. Perhaps it's on a Saudization issue. Maybe it's on a local content issue that, again, maybe in the initial iteration of a draft regulation, it doesn't quite reflect kind of real world realities. And it may look good on paper, but when you start talking through how it's going to be operationalized with companies and investors, it just doesn't quite get there. So instead of going directly to that ministry or that regulator, it's always great, or along with you, to have the NCC and or MISA kind of going along with you to make the case that, look, to unleash new investment dollars, to make the kingdom more competitive, we need to listen to what the private sector has to say, because it's far, far easier, to adjust a proposed regulation before it's finalized, as opposed to chasing it afterwards and trying to go behind it and fix it. So our point is, let's institutionalize a process by which, particularly when there's going to be something that's broad and impacts a good chunk of the economy or a really critical sector, let's have a process in place to make sure that we're hearing the input from the private sector, and there's an opportunity for us to have a say at that and be at the table, because it's in everybody's interest, to try to get these things right, or as close to right out of the gate, as opposed to having to chase it on the back end.
Well, and again, going along in this vein, in a new world in terms of receptivity and public-private communications, last summer you hosted a delegation from Mukatafa, and I sent a note over to you and Liz. I said, I don't even know these guys. Can you put me to put? And so you put us in, and we had the CEO and founder of Mukatafa, Prince Raleed bin Nasser Al Saud, on the show. Just a tremendous episode. the reason I mentioned this was what he's doing didn't exist in Saudi Arabia 3 years ago. Essentially, having sectors, communicate, organize, come together, agree on what their issues are, better communicate and advocate for their issues. And Mukataba is sort of a nexus for this. Is that accurate?
No, no, absolutely, and that's so vital. And you're right; it hasn't existed,
Right.
and the idea that you're going to kind of organize the input along sectors like that and make sure the voice is heard is absolutely a game changer in many respects in my mind. So it's very exciting.
And one of the things I thought was a sort of a fundamental game changing element part of it is in the old days, but and everybody has to do business under the within the guidelines that business is done. So previously, if you were a large contractor, you would try and cultivate relationships within key ministries, and they may not talk to each other, but you on your own behalf, you try and get ahead, which is what you're supposed to do as a business leader, and find the right access and turn the right keys and this sort of thing. One of the reasons I think Mukataba is so interesting is because the way of doing business is different. Now, you still obviously have to have these relationships, but essentially what's happened, instead of finding the right guy in the government, they're now organizing and say, okay, we're dealing with the government as a policy entirety. It's not, we're not going to be able to work the government because the government has policy. Obviously, relationships matter. But do you understand what I'm trying to get at? The mode of operating has seemed to have changed. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think that no, you're spot on, and I think that's one of the things that's exciting, as opposed to your point, Richard. It completely relying on your company's ability to kind of get to that right person. Yes, at the end of the day, you're going to compete with companies A, B, and C, on that tender or that new deal. But when it comes to the playing field, what are the rules of the game and shaping that playing field? I think we're in a much better position if we go in as industry and kind of the sector heavyweights, be they the domestic players and the foreign investors and companies, as a kind of a consortium, if you will, and say, like, look, if we really want to make the kingdom more competitive in this sector, we need to roll up our sleeves and get busy on, A, B, and C, when it comes to that policy regulatory regime. And then once we make those improvements, we'll all compete like hell, on the business. But as opposed to going in as individual company, Steve Lutes Inc., let's join forces and let's go in and say, here's are the things that we really need to tackle to make this sector much more competitive and attractive to investment. And yeah, I think numbers are always going to prevail in a situation like that.
Yeah, it's compelling when you can do that, and I think that's the beauty of something like Mukataba. From the U.S. perspective, your members in the U.S. Saudi Business Program and others, you have one of the nice things I like about the chamber is when you do things, it's not exclusive always. It's a broader general audience that can attend. This is how Lucia and I get in. We can't afford membership. The what do you hear from your members? What are their major concerns?
Yeah, no, well, I think a lot of it now, they, like you were just describing, Richard, we have, what we've done is tried to organize ourselves on a working group basis, and it is very sectoral driven. So a lot of the work that we've done on that, going back to that example of the PDPL, or some of the regulations that have come out of now CST on digital platform content, some of the things that are coming out of the National Cybersecurity Authority, we've organized ourselves as working groups. Now, what's interesting is that you would think, oh, an ICT working group or a kind of a digital economy working group. I'm sure it's just kind of the IBMs and Googles and Metas. But in fact, we have companies that are from the financial services industry on there. We have healthcare companies on there, because at the end of the day, every company is a data company. Every company has, kind of assets or skin in the game when it comes to those discussions. So it's actually quite broad. but it also allows us to then focus our efforts in that space. So what we have found is a lot of the issues that come forward are usually generated from those working groups, and we've got one as well in healthcare. And we continue, but of course there's divisions within that. You have the life sciences companies and biopharma companies, and then you have the kind of more medical device med tech companies. Then you have the insurance companies. So they all have their kind of subset of issues, but at the end of the day, there are some overarching things. And one thing that we hear, and one of the things that we talk to the Saudis about, is in the healthcare space, for example, is that you have a lot of stakeholders. So trying to get stakeholder alignment on, how they go about providing market access and approval for new therapies, new technologies, that's super important. And making sure along the way that it respects the intellectual property, oftentimes of our member companies, and make sure that they're not letting anything slip into the market with the green light and the approval of the government before it should. So the great thing is we have a great partner there at the Saudi IP Authority, a relatively new entity that I know I'm personally excited about, having a caretaker in the Saudi government that's focused on having a robust intellectual property regime. Hey, that's important, for a lot of American companies across a lot of industries, because the lifeblood of their company is their IP, and making sure that that's respected and protected is going to be really key, to driving more investment and innovative type activities like setting up R&D centers and whatnot in the kingdom. So those types of issues usually come about from conversations going back to what you were talking about, Richard, on a kind of sectoral by sectoral level. There are overarching things. We hear a lot of companies talking about a lot of the local content mandates that are coming, the regional headquarters question. We hear a lot of inquiries on things that kind of cut across the entire economy. The VAT, which was increased during COVID. Off the top of my head, those are three things that often come up, regardless of what sector you're in. But again, what we're focused on is making sure, and we have found receptive Saudi decision makers that are willing to talk to the companies on all of those issues. And I would say all of those things are evolving. And the good thing, though, is that, as you were talking about the past, sometimes we couldn't get an audience, we couldn't have a conversation around those topics. But nowadays, it's the door's open. The door's open to dialogue, and we can talk through these things so that the Saudi decision makers on those issues kind of understand the perspective, of our member companies, and not just our members really reflect in many respects, kind of the international business community, as these issues come up.
Yeah, there seems to be significant alignment. Incentives are aligned, and everyone's sort of pulling towards the same result, same goal. Now, both you and Lucian were just in Riyadh. You were laying the groundwork. Do you have a delegation going over later this year?
Yeah, we've been talking about a lot of these new sectors. Really, I think what bodes well for the future of the U.S. Saudi economic relationship, we're planning on taking we haven't locked the exact dates in, but post Labor Day, before UNGA in New York, a innovation business delegation, and we expect that to focus really in a lot of the different innovative sectors. But then again, what sector doesn't have innovation? But I think we'll see kind of coalescing around that digital economy that we were talking about. I would expect to see a lot of participation in the healthcare, the life sciences, genomics, med tech, and then also in an area where we haven't talked a lot about, in kind of the energy and climate, all things sustainability, carbon circular economy. I think there's a huge opportunity in that space, and it doesn't get talked a lot about. But I think the Saudis are leaning into that and are very serious about that. And I think it bodes well for the chamber and our members and companies broadly to come over to Saudi Arabia and find out about the opportunities and what that evolution is going to look like in that space.
They just stood up a research, development, and innovation authority, which just late last year. which I think will be focusing on exactly what you're talking about. I know you have other partners, and there's logical places to plug in. But so that's exciting. So that's going to happen in September.
That's the game plan. You've got it.
Yeah, is there a website or anything out there that
we'll share it with you. We haven't built that out yet. This what we were doing on this trip was essentially going over to lay the groundwork and make sure that this would be well received, and we got the thumbs up and basically in every meeting, and sometimes more than thumbs up. Like, let's
can you do it tomorrow?
Can we move it up a few months? Can we get it coming next month? I mean, in very to their credit, Saudi fashion, let's get this done now. But obviously, it takes a while to corral. We want to bring a big delegation, a robust delegation, a mix of, those companies that have been there in Saudi, and maybe explore like what else can you be doing, and can you pivot left, right? Can you deepen what you're doing? And then also companies that would be new to the space, that haven't dipped their toes in the water, or maybe they dip their toes, but they haven't dove in yet. And, see what we can do to get some new investment, new business activity from a mission like this. But I think it's a great opportunity to, for the kingdom, not only to showcase what they're doing in a lot of these areas, but also to match that up with U.S. interest and, frankly, U.S. technology and capability in a lot of these spaces. And again, try to drive that future of the bilateral economic relationship.
Steve, just one more question on, at least from my end, and feel free to kind of go anywhere with this. But I mean, you've been doing a lot over in Riyadh. Richard just mentioned we were just there at the same time, and Richard's going in a couple of weeks. But you've been there a lot. You've been in and out of the region a lot, and then Egypt and the UAE and other places as well. But a lot of what you're doing as well is hosting Saudis that come to the U.S. And I guess I'm going to do a sort of Richard in a two-part question. One, do you have more activities coming up in the coming weeks and months here in the U.S. that maybe U.S. companies could potentially attend if they're not ready to make a trip over to Saudi Arabia yet? And then the second part of that is, a lot of times when you do these events, you have HRH Princess Rima attend and speak and engage with the audience. How valuable is she as a partner for you guys in what you're doing?
Well, let me start there with that, and I feel bad for not mentioning it earlier. We mentioned how great Minister Al-Swaha and his peers in that ecosystem have been, and same with Dr. Abdulaziz at SAIP and Dr. Iman. But really, for us, Princess Rima, Her Royal Highness, she's an anchor, here as the ambassador. I mean, she is willing to meet with and take meetings with companies, that come here to Washington and help navigate and understand what those opportunities or sometimes challenges are in Saudi Arabia. But she's also a great advocate, for a much more robust and broader economic relationship and the relationship overall. But she has really been a pivotal, essential partner in everything that we're doing at the chamber, and we're really grateful for the advocacy and the activity that she gives, to the economic pillar of the relationship. Obviously, it's a dynamic, broad relationship, but she does give a lot of time and attention, to that economic pillar, because I think she appreciates, like we do, that it is so fundamental. And at the end of the day, it's a win-win. And there's a lot of potential. We're already doing a lot in the space, but there's so much more potential there. You're right. Her business background, her work with the Olympic Committee. I mean, there's so much there that she draws upon. And then she's also just a genuine person who I think is all about, driving results and trying to do things that build a better bilateral relationship. And I think that it's incredibly sincere and genuine on her part. And you couldn't ask, as you said, for a better diplomat. So I would give her a lot of credit for everything she's done. And we look forward to continuing to work with her. And yes, when it comes to inbound delegations, yes, we go out, to Saudi Arabia and do a lot out in country, but we always welcome the opportunity as Saudi officials, business leaders come this way to think creatively about how, we can hear from them and talk policy, but also to get what's the latest, and frankly, not just the latest now, but, what are you forecasting? What's coming down the pipe? What's your priorities, for the next 6 months, but also the next 2-3 years, so we can try to think strategically about how we can fit into that. Not just as a chamber, but oftentimes as individual member companies that we might have in the room with them. Now, a lot of this, some of this is buttressed around activities like the IMF World Bank meeting, which will happen in the spring. The fall meeting, I think, is actually in Morocco. So we're putting all of our eggs in that spring meeting basket, and we know that traditionally the finance minister, Minister Al Jadaan, comes in for that. We'll also bring the central bank governor, usually in a robust delegation, perhaps the minister of economy. Part of our trip, we just met him for the first time as the chamber out in Riyadh, and I have to say he was incredibly impressive and a broad swath of responsibility. So we do look forward to ramping up our kind of collaboration with him and the Ministry of Economy, in addition to kind of our longstanding kind of stakeholder partners like at the Ministry of Commerce, the Ministry of Investment, Finance, et cetera. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, around, kind of the central bank and the Capital Markets Authority. One of the other things we just talked about when we were in Riyadh with Minister Al Swaha helped pull this together was the fintech space. So again, it's another one of those electric, I think, emerging areas, and the policy, the regulatory environment's evolving and is going to open that up. So we're very excited to help U.S. companies kind of understand the opportunities, and we obviously need to continue to discuss the regulatory work that's being done in that space. And then, there'll be the UN in September, hopefully between the IMF World Bank Spring Meeting and the UN. There'll be more visits that'll come in. I don't know of any others that are officially scheduled. The TIFA is actually happening out in Riyadh. Gosh, is it? I think next week. So USTR will be out there for that. We'll have Liz Clark from our team in Riyadh for that. But we always are looking for those kind of government to government interactions or inbound officials to pull together these types of discussions. So, and the other thing that she does focus on, because I'm going to work this in, so the Hoosiers did sweep Purdue, for the first time in a long time in men's basketball. And of course, our women's basketball team is killing it too. But I have to say, one of the best dinners I ever had, IU has an incredible international alumni program. I was talking to a friend, and they're like, huge chapter in Riyadh of IU alumni.
Oh, wow.
So this was pre-pandemic. I got in touch with them, and they took me out to kind of a traditional Saudi restaurant. And so we walk in, and I thought, boy, how am I going to find these guys? Because I didn't know them. And then I look over in a corner, and there's like 12 guys. Some of them have the IU hats on, other of them have their thobes, but they have like an IU red sweatshirt over it. Great dinner, great discussion. It cut across several generations of Hoosiers, like people that were my dad's age to some that had just graduated. And it brings me to an actual point, other than that IU killed Purdue this year. And that point is that I love the fact, and it's again one of those untold stories about how many Stouties study and walk away from the United States having earned degrees. And Princess Rima is the epitome of a great diplomat, but all of these Saudi students, are great diplomats in their own right. And they go back, a lot of them will go into the Saudi government, they'll go into the business world, and, they're great advocates at the end of the day for a stronger and more dynamic U.S. Saudi relationship. So I think that's, there's a lot of untold stories, positive untold stories to the U.S. Saudi relationship. And that's one, of course, the three of us and those that are close to it know it, but I don't think it's something that's understood by a lot of Americans.
Agreed.
The very dynamic and very impressive Mr. Steve Lutes. Move over, Pitbull. We may have a new Mr. Worldwide. Steve is Vice President, Middle East Affairs of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. For over 15 years now, he's been with that esteemed organization. Steve, thank you so much for your time. This was awesome. We really enjoyed it.
Well, love being on the 966. Kudos to you both, and it's great to see you both, and to be with you, and look forward to seeing how you're going to continue to grow this thing. Congratulations.
We will, and you're a star, Steve, and it's this is a great episode. Thanks so much.
That was our conversation with Mr. Steve Lutes. Brilliant guy, really good dude. Richard, good stuff, man. That was awesome.
You said it at the beginning. He really hits his mark. He's crisp. He knows his business. He knows his topics, and he's so deeply involved and well versed in the subject matter that it's really informative and really easy to sort of extract all the information he has to offer, because it's very clear, very concise. Really, really good interview.
And shout out to his team as well. That he mentioned them in the interview. Liz Clark, Kush Chosky, those guys and gals are working really hard with him. They really just do a really wonderful job. So it was great to have him on, Richard, this week. We will be back next week with more of the traditional format, just you and me, as both of us are traveling to the region, Middle East region, next week. A lot going on, Richard. We've got so many great interviews coming up as well. So stay tuned, and thank you very much, Richard. This was awesome.